we'll start here the same way we have all of them. We'll go in and we'll discover our devices so we know what we're working with. So there's our IP address. For this demonstration, it's going to be 215.1, and our subnet is 248. So 255.255.255.248. And we'll kind of come back to that in just a second. So here we'll look at what controllers we're working with. So we'll discover them. And in case we haven't mentioned it before, this discover we're doing with this utility, that is always a broadcast. So we're doing a broadcast to discover that stuff. So if I wasn't on that subnet, or I mean, in this case, if I was on the network, I'm fine. But if I was on a separate VLAN, I wouldn't see them. So here we show the controllers both have a subnet of 248. And so here is the calculator we used before. And you'll see here, if I change the subnet mask to 0, you'll see I have the full range available to me there and there. But if I change the subnet to, say, 6 devices, you'll see that it automatically gives me the correct subnet mask and shows me the range of addresses I can use when assigning my controllers. So this is why we really recommend using a calculator like this, because it really simplifies the process and removes error for you. Because once you just put your IP address in, likely for your computer, and then fill in the number of hosts you want, and it'll give you the subnet. And you see here, since we're on the same subnet, 248, and the addresses that are assigned to the controllers are within those 6 addresses in my host range, we can talk. So we'll ping both ways. There we go. And so since we can talk, so now what we're going to do is we're going to use invalid entries, or we're going to move the controller, one of the controllers, outside of the subnet that it's currently in, so that you can see what happens when we either make a mistake or, in this case, intentionally do it wrong. So here I'm going to pick a new subnet, and I'm going to move a controller to that subnet. So I'm going to put what I want my IP address of my machine to be, which will be 9 in this case. And then it's going to give me 6 hosts, because that's what I want again. So I can use addresses between 9 and 14. So 215.9 and 215.14. I can use addresses in that range with that subnet. So I'll change this controller to be one of those addresses. And I'm going to change the gateway and the DNS to just be the IP address of my computer, just to simplify the process, since we're just really demonstrating this. And here, I'm going to add a second connection. And maybe we should talk a little bit further about this, Dave, while I'm about to do this. So what we're going to do here is we're going to add a second IP address to the same network adapter on my laptop. And this is something we do very commonly. This is a very good troubleshooting tool. And if you're working with multiple subnets, this is a very good way for you to test them and work with multiple subnets without having to remove yourself from one just to talk on another. So you'll see me here. I'm going to add a second IP and a second subnet mask to a single network adapter. And I'll show you how to do that right now. So go ahead and hit play if you don't mind. And here I'm going to add the second IP address here in a second. I'll show you. So here I just moved it simply first, and then I'll add it in a second to show you what happens. So let's talk to it and see what happens. And here I'm going to find the devices to make sure that I should only see the one on the subnet I'm on now. I can still discover the other one, but it won't show up as a valid connection. So I'm on the second subnet. And there I can see both, since that's a broadcast traffic, and we can broadcast across subnets, which you see there. I see both controllers, but I won't be able to ping the controller on the second subnet, which you'll see me try to do here. So let's log into the controller and we'll attempt to ping the controllers from one another to show that we can't talk. So you see I can't load VAV2. So to do that, I'm going to have to add a second network address. And here, I'm going to add that second subnet. So now that I can work with both controllers, even though those controllers can't see one another, I'm adding myself to the first subnet we created, and I'm also on the second. So now I'll be able to communicate to both controllers, but the controllers won't be able to communicate directly with one another. And if this was a supervisor, if you needed separate subnets, this would be a good way to manage a supervisor, just to have it sit on both subnets. If you needed it to talk, say, to both controllers over BACnet, this would be a good way to handle that. BACnet IP, anyway. Okay, you can see here, I can ping the first subnet, and I can ping the second subnet. And now we're going to show that the controllers won't be able to ping one another. Okay, so now the next step, since these aren't going to be able to talk, and let's say these are the addresses these controllers need to have, and perhaps my subnet is too small. Maybe I need to expand my subnet. So we're going to show you how to do that as the last step, is how do I expand that subnet to encompass the controllers so that they can then talk. Because perhaps these are addresses that were given to me and I maybe created a subnet that was too small. So I'm going to increase the number of hosts. So I'm going to put the address of my laptop, and then I'm going to increase the number of hosts to 14. And you'll see that range encompasses both controllers. And that's my new subnet is 240. So 255.255.255.240. And so I'll leave the addresses the same, but I'll change the subnet and I'll make sure my gateway and DNS are updated to reflect the new settings. In this case, like I said, they'll just point to my laptop because we're testing directly. There we go. There we go. And so now that the subnet's changed, I'll change the subnet on my laptop, and I'll get rid of the second one, and I'll just expand the first one so that I can use both. There we go, and I'll change my address to 1. And now all the controllers will be able to talk to one another, and I'll be able to talk to both on a single subnet. So really what we're trying to showcase here is that you should be using, when you're doing a job, you really should be using a subnet that's reasonably sized for the number of controllers you have. If you have 300 controllers, and you want them on a single subnet, then you should use the calculator and put 300 hosts in there and figure out what an appropriate subnet would be for 300 controllers. Also, if you have 6 controllers, you might leave yourself a little breathing room and say, okay, I'll have a subnet with 30 or a subnet with 14, but it doesn't make sense to have a subnet of 255.255.0.0 with thousands of potential addresses for 7 controllers, right? That's just, and also it's not necessarily from a security standpoint, but from a logical grouping standpoint, it makes sense to group these together so that if somebody were to come along and put a laptop on a network or add another device, you don't end up with overlapping ranges. The tighter you make your range, the less likely anybody's going to interfere with it, or you'll have conflicts on your network. And so it's better to use it. So you can use subnetting. You can combine subnetting with VLANs to have a really nice network that's logically divided within VLANs, and also using VLANs for the security they offer you. So you can use these in combination to really divide your job up, instead of just doing it like most of us do architecturally and just saying, oh, I want a VLAN per floor or a subnet per floor. you can divide much deeper in, or you can expand out, but you can use these things for what they're intended, and that's really where we're focusing. VLANs are really, to isolate traffic, and subnets are just to group devices. That's the best way to think about it. It can get more advanced than that, but from where we sit here, that's really how you should think about it.